known for putting on summer opportunities in professional learning. And this is exciting for me because it's the first one I've ever done virtually with the help of a great team that you'll hear from later, but it's just very exciting. So welcome, welcome. Bernadette, did you want to say anything?
Welcome everyone. We are also, we're so excited to have this opportunity with all of you. And I think Christina is now putting something in the chat as far as registering for this afternoon's conference. Please look at the chat. There is a link there for you to register. And Christina, would you like to let them know what they would do for that one?
Yeah, so the form will look very familiar because it's the same registration form that you used to sign up for this conference. Again, we are tracking attendance, so we are asking everyone to register with the same link at the beginning and at the end of the conference. I see that we put it in the chat box, so please do take a moment, and we'll probably be sending out reminders as more people come in to register to make sure that we capture their attendance. And there's another reminder that this conference will be recorded. So once we get ready and get norms expressed, we will start recording, and you will see a permission pop up asking for your consent to record. Other than that, we would love your engagement, and we really hope you enjoy this conference. So Bernadette, when you're ready, let me know when you'd like me to start recording.
All right, thank you so much, Christina. What we miss, Christina, is you introducing yourself as well. So please let us tell us something about yourself.
Well, my name is Christina Atkinson. You probably know me through email. I send out most of the reminders and updates. I work for Silicon Valley Education Foundation. I am the coordinator of strategic projects, and I've been on the team for about 6 months now. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Christina. Next slide, please. And this is going to be V's part. And V, please introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is V, and I also work for SVF. This is something new that we're trying it out. And for those of you who are currently logging in from a computer, and please help us to change your name. Most importantly, it will help Christina to track your attendance, and for me to put you in the right breakout rooms. Today, we're putting together 6 different breakout rooms during this conference, and we're also showcasing 6 different teachers with the following topics that you can see on the screen right now. When the breakout times happens and I don't see the number that you indicated on your name, I will put you in a random rooms. So thank you.
So again, just to reiterate at this point, having this slide in front of you, we would love to, again, please rename yourself, starting with the number of the breakout room that you would like to attend. Breakout rooms 1 and 2 are for our elementary teachers, but you can also join our middle school and high school as well, led by Kelly, Danielle, and then 3 and 4 are for our middle school, and rooms 5 and 6 are for our high school. Okay.
I will go ahead and start recording. Oh, it's recording already.
Thanks, Christina. All right, Denise.
Okay, so we are getting ready to kick off, as I said, our first virtual conference for Eastside Alliance. A lot of you have participated with some of our amazing professional learning throughout the year. For those who have not, you're in for a treat. It's assessment for learning. That's what AFL stands for. And this conference is the power of collective efficacy in mathematics. Mathematics is a theme that we have had in the Eastside Alliance for many years, because that's an area that we feel is essential, as all other content areas are also, but mathematics is, after looking at data, we see that this is an area where we could really give more support to students that are furthest from access and opportunity. So you're just in store for a great treat today, I think. And I may be a little partial, but it's going to be really great.
Thank you, Denise. And as mentioned, Eastside Alliance focus on strengthening collective teacher efficacy truly upholds the belief that we have that our students can learn, do, and reason with mathematics. And so we are so excited that we have our guest speaker this afternoon as well to enlighten us and to have us an opportunity to deepen our understanding as to the power of collective teacher efficacy. Denise, that's our agenda for this afternoon.
Yeah, so we pretty much went through all that. I am going to move to the next slide, and then we're going to go ahead and look at our conference learning intentions.
And so, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and so these are our 3 conference learning intentions this afternoon. It aims to address the individually and collectively to gain a deeper understanding, as what we've mentioned a while ago, of collective teacher efficacy, its impact to positively affect math engagement. We are also aiming to utilize the mathematics toolkit, and during the breakout, our Eastside teacher leaders will lead our breakout rooms with mathematics activities highlighting one or more of the featured strategies in the mathematics toolkit. And all throughout, we will be engaged in discourse to talk about equitable practices that address unfinished learning. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we are very, very excited. We met this young lady the beginning of the 1920 school year when we started all of our work with our some of our districts in the Eastside Alliance around teacher and collective efficacy. And we have established a great partnership with Dr. Jenni Donohoo, who is the author of Collective Efficacy. And she will be weaving some of these concepts in her talk to you today. She's a best-selling author and professional learning facilitator with more than 15 years experience in leading school change. She's the past president of Learning Forward Ontario. In addition to her consulting work, she's in secondment to the Curriculum and Assessment Policy Branch in the Ontario Ministry of Education. In this role, she works alongside system and school leaders in order to improve the quality, professional learning, and the collaboration in schools and districts. And we are so honored and excited to have her take us through this year as she's done, and to just be our culminating speaker for the work that we've been doing, and also the kickoff for the work that we're going to do around efficacy next year. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jenni Donohoo.
Thank you so much, Denise. And just before I get started, I just want to pause to give everyone an opportunity to assign themselves to whatever breakout they want. And so I've noticed some chats in the chat pod where some clarification is needed. And so V, do you want to address some of those as a whole group? Because I know a couple people have just joined us in the last couple of minutes.
Thank you. So if you recently joined us, you will probably have not seen the full list of the room options that we have. So I'm going to put the room options again in the chat. Just let me know in the chat which room you would like to be in, and then I'll put you in the room. Thank you, Jenni.
Okay, no problem. So I will start sharing my screen then. And I welcome everyone. And as introduced earlier, today's topic is about collective efficacy. And it's the overwhelming power that we have when we share the belief that we can impact change in schools. And I often like to start sessions with a quote that comes from Professional Capital, written by Andy Hargraves and Michael Fullen. And in that book, they say that sustainable and successful school improvement can't be done to or for teachers. It can only be accomplished by and with teachers. And that's at the heart of my work. And I really believe that teachers, once empowered to make decisions that are critical to student improvement, we can realize incredible things together as a collective. And so, let me just advance here. Denise did such a great job introducing me. I won't spend much time, but I am a former classroom teacher and began, as I started to work on my master's and then my doctorate, really try to articulate through my writing why we do what we do in education. And my writing has become my own form of professional learning for myself. And so our success criteria for this particular session, we've got 4 big ideas that I want to focus on. One starts with explaining the effect size research, and this really revolves around John Hattie's visible learning database and where collective teacher efficacy lies in respect to other things that influence student achievement. I'm hoping by the end of our time together, you'll be able to describe why and how collective teacher efficacy impacts student outcomes, and draw some conclusions from examples of case studies. I'm going to share very briefly some examples of some schools in the United States where teachers have come together and been successful in raising their efficacy beliefs through their joint work and realizing reductions of gaps in achievement with different subgroups of students. And then what I'm hoping you'll also do and be thinking about throughout our time together is what actionable step might you and your team take for developing collective efficacy, especially as it relates to mathematics. So what is collective teacher efficacy? If you haven't heard the term before, I encourage you to look at this definition and perhaps in the chat pod, write the word or phrase that resonates with you based on what you see here in the definition of what collective teacher efficacy is. What word or phrase resonates with you? And I like this particular definition, that collective efficacy is the belief that teachers in a given school make an educational difference to students over and above the educational impact of students' homes and communities. I see that's resonating with others as well, educational difference. And that's an important belief system because as Albert Bandura, who's the person who coined the term efficacy, he's an educational psychologist out at Stanford University, he has said that our efficacy beliefs impact how teams think, feel, motivate themselves, and behave. And we will see that collective efficacy makes a difference in our work in schools. Now, just before we get started, I have created a short anticipation guide. The idea behind an anticipation guide is that it will activate your prior knowledge, but also cue you into what's important and what's to come. And we revisit it at the end to see if your beliefs or your ideas have changed. So the before column at the left side, whether you agree or disagree, and there's just 4 statements in this one. And again, we'll come back to it after to see if we've changed your mind on any of them. And I don't expect you to write your responses in the chat pod. I just want you to reflect for yourself. Do you agree or disagree with each one of these statements? And so I will pause and let you have a look at those statements. And you might want to jot down, if you have a paper and a pen available for each one, whether you agree or disagree. Okay, again, we'll come back to this one at the end. I just hope you've had enough time. Again, I mentioned Albert Bandura, educational psychologist out at Stanford University. In the 1970s, this research is not new. Albert Bandura started to notice patterns as he engaged in his sociological studies of groups of people. And he noticed that as confidence levels were high, it had a significant relationship with that team's ability to achieve. The higher the team's confidence, the higher their achievement. Now, collective teacher efficacy results in greater student achievement, but we also know that the notion of efficacy results in greater achievement in other domains as well, such as in sports. The greater the team's efficacy in their belief to outperform their opponent, the better that they perform, some research shows. In business as well, and in criminology, in neighborhoods where neighbors have a sense of collective neighborhood efficacy in their joint ability to impact crime, there is significantly less crime. But of course, we're talking about collective teacher efficacy. So what matters most in raising student achievement? And what you see here on the screen is a screenshot of the cover of a couple of Professor Hattie's books, John Hattie. And in 2009, he wrote a synthesis of the meta-analyses of all of the studies in education that outlined factors that influence student achievement. And it's the largest educational synthesis to date of factors that we know make a difference in regard to student outcomes, in particular student achievement. And at that time in 2009, he listed 150 factors and ranked them in order. That was 10 years ago, and he continues to update his research regularly. He's now up to 250 factors. Now, some of those factors come from the home, like socioeconomic status or parental involvement in their child's education. Even a factor like time watching television. There's studies on that show how that impacts student achievement. Some of those factors come from the students themselves, like students' ability to concentrate, students' prior achievement, even something like gender. Some of the factors in the meta-analysis come from the school. Factors under the school domain might include school size, configuration, if it's traditional versus open classrooms, etc. Even school leadership would fall under that domain. And then there's factors that influence student achievement that come from the curriculum, like is it problem-based or is it specific things around the curriculum. And then the final category is factors that influence student achievement that come from the teacher. And things that would fall under there, it's things like teacher-student relationships, teacher clarity. And so out of all of these factors, some of the things that happen in schools actually have a negative impact on student achievement. And we'd look at those, if you look at the graphic, those would be in those red zone. It'd be anything that falls below 0 would have a negative impact on student achievement. And the things that fall into that red zone, I don't think it would come as a surprise to you. Things like bullying. What else could you predict? And I'm going to encourage you in the chat pod, what else would you predict might be in that red zone? Besides bullying, what else might have a negative impact on student achievement? And so we also know, lack of connection. One of the things is when students feel disliked by their teachers, that has a negative influence. Another one that falls in that red zone is when kids, he calls it mobility, but he actually means when kids move from school to school over the course of a year, the more often they move, the more detrimental that is to their academic achievement. And then we know also things that have some small impact on student achievement. And that would be anything that would fall between 0 and 0.20. And what John Hattie identified as what he calls the hinge point, and he marked that at the 0.40 being the hinge point. And he says that guarantees us a year's growth for a year's income, year's growth for a year's input. And so he says if we set the mark below that, if we settle for anything under 0.40, it's not right because we're not giving students the year's growth or the year's progress for the year that they are with us. And so that hinge point becomes critical in our success in thinking what are the factors that influence student achievement that we know through research that are above that hinge point, that we know will make a significant difference to students' academic achievement. And so that's a real brief overview of the visible learning research. And what I'd like you to do is, well, one of the things that he also noted, we said some of those things fall into that red zone. 95% of the research had positive influence. So he basically says, as long as we have a pulse, we're making a difference. But again, the message is we want to know not just what's in just above the 0 mark, not just what's, between 0 and 0.20. That's not enough. What are the things that you would see in the blue? What are the things that are on the far right of the continuum? And so I'm going to share with you just 6 factors. And if you're willing, you could predict in the chat pod what might be the highest. What matters most in raising student achievement? Out of these 6, this is a subset, it's not the top 6, but what do you think matters most in raising student achievement? Would you pick E? Would you pick A? Would you pick B? If you had to rank these, what order might you rank them in? I'll just pause there for a moment. Okay, so let me reveal the answer. You see that there's a variety of guesses. Thank you for contributing. Again, this is a subset. He's up to 250 influences. And if we look at this particular subset, they're actually in order from 1 to 6, as far as what the research shows, the visible learning research. Collective teacher efficacy being the first, most important. Students' expectations about what they're capable of accomplishing being number 2. Students' prior achievement being 3rd. Socioeconomic status, followed by home environment and homework. Now, I just want to do a little bit of explaining because, well, if we look at the rank, that's one piece of information. But if we look at the effect size, it gives us more information because it tells us about the magnitude of the effect. So out of these 6 factors, do you think they're all above the hinge point? Do they all fall above 0.40? Which ones are along the blue? Which would fall in the blue along that continuum? And so here are the effect sizes. And perhaps you predicted that all of them, with the exception of homework, are above the hinge point. And here we see, some of you guessed that home environment matters. Yeah, at an effect size of 0.52, it definitely does. And so do these other things like socioeconomic status and students' prior achievement. But collective teacher efficacy matters more. And before I talk more about that, I just want to share this notion of homework. And one of the major messages in the visible learning work is that we can't just take these effect sizes at face value. There's a story behind the numbers. Meaning that, when we look at these meta-analyses, it involves hundreds of studies involving thousands of students. And what we're looking at is an average. An effect size allows us to compare across studies and across time and across different variables. It gives us a common denominator, I guess, of making comparisons. And so if we know that and we see that effect size of homework is under the hinge point, it's meant to open up a conversation to get to what is the story behind the numbers. And if we look more closely and disaggregate the research on homework, it tells us that in a primary setting, homework has a fairly significantly low effect size. But in a high school with a 0.64, it's well above the hinge point. So the message isn't that we dismiss homework because the effect size in the visible learning says it's at 0.29 and that's not the hinge point. It's meant to open up a conversation about what makes homework more effective, what's the purpose of homework, and how can we capitalize on the power of homework? What can we find out about it to increase the effect of homework in our work? And so let's come back to the notion of collective efficacy. As I said before, and as you saw based on that ranking, the effect size, collective teacher efficacy is 3 times more powerful and predictive of student learning than these other things you see here. And that's a pretty powerful message. Now, I'm not saying that these other things don't matter. Clearly they do, but collective teacher efficacy matters a lot more. And that is what the research shows. And it's not new research. It dates back many, many years. Schools that have a firmly established sense of collective efficacy and are otherwise similar have higher student achievement. The research also shows, and so this is just coming back to, we know that socioeconomic status matters, but collective teacher efficacy in this one study, and in many others as well, but you'll see there the citation. I always like to share the studies that come rather than just saying research shows. I want to point you to the research that collective efficacy is the strongest independent influence, and that socioeconomic status matters too, but to a much lesser extent. And in the chat pod, I'm just going to encourage you to predict again. This particular study was done in 2019, large-scale empirical study that looked at students at risk. And we know that collective efficacy serves to increase achievement. And in this particular case, looking at the achievement in mathematics. And so overall achievement did increase. But also the researchers found that collective efficacy was associated with a certain percentage of reduction in a gap between minority students and other students. And so if we think about that, how much of a percentage do you think teacher efficacy accounted for in closing a gap? I'm seeing some answers there. You can type the percentage or the letter. Gap closing. And lots of great guesses. Thank you. What the research showed was it was actually a 50% reduction in academic disadvantage experienced by minority students. And if anyone's interested in these research studies, this is my hobby. I'll read the 30-page research report, and what I like to do is summarize it into a one-pager, and so I can share those with the team at Silicon Valley. And if you're interested in reading more about this particular study or any of the other ones I share, I'll go ahead and I'll share those resources, and you can reach out to the team and ask for them. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do, I haven't done this before, so this will be my first time. I wanted to share with you very briefly 3 case studies of situations where people in schools, teachers, leaders together have been able to overcome the results of students' disadvantages, where they've realized collective efficacy and increased student achievement and reduced gaps between different subgroups of students. As I share the stories, I just want you to listen for what's resonating with you. What commonalities do you hear between the studies? What questions might you have based on what you're hearing? And so I'm just going to go ahead and share some of this information with you. So this first case study, this is a screenshot or a picture of New London High School. It's located in Connecticut. And at this school, 100% of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch. They were very much underperforming on the state test, and they had a fairly low graduation rate. Tommy Thompson, who arrived as a principal 5 years, maybe it was more like 7 years ago, he said to me that the teachers were feeling very overwhelmed when he arrived there, that the school had a negative reputation and it was located in an area of very low socioeconomic status. He said that white students outperformed Black students by a large margin, but 5 years later, the achievement gap between Black students and white students was totally eliminated, as measured by the Connecticut Academic Performance Test. And New London High School received an award for being recognized by the USA News and World Reports as one of the best high schools in their rankings. So Tommy noted when he arrived, there was an absence of instructional leadership, accountability, and he said efficacy. Many staff believed that whatever they did to try to positively influence student achievement wasn't going to make a difference. So what Tommy set out to do was help teachers recognize that they could make a difference. That's what he focused on in his leadership efforts, helping teachers to realize individual and collective impact. Now, 5 years later, 81.3% of Black students, I think I've got this on a chart. Well, this is, on this chart, what you see is the results from the Connecticut Academic Performance Test. And on the left is for the state in Black students, and on the right, New London. You can see significantly above the average for the state. And when I said they closed the gaps between white and Black, 82.1% of the white students scored proficient. So just less than 7% above, or 0.07% above those of the Black students. Now, Tommy also noticed that not only was academic achievement increasing, but disciplinary office referrals also declined. And he said, number one, which was most important, teachers felt good about what they were accomplishing. And he said what was critical is that he ensured they had time to collaborate, and that as teachers collaborated, they were focused on instructional improvement. And he said that the peer support that teachers started to feel together helped them at that high school build a sense of community that resulted in feelings of optimism and confidence. And he said, as one teacher put it, she said, "This has helped me so much that I feel so much better able to support my English language learners." And that's just one example. And he has stories from many, many, many teachers who felt that way. Very briefly, this is case study number 2. This is Garth Larson, the principal in a school in Wisconsin. It's a K-5 school. When Garth started as the principal at this school, he explained that the school was trending in the wrong direction on state assessments. And this is the school's 2011-2012 accountability rating. It's a district report card that showed overall a score of 57.9%, which meant that they were meeting very few expectations. And there was a relative, or he said it was very reflective of the downward trend that the school had experienced for the previous 7 to 8 years. So on a downward trend for 7 to 8 years. And he said that over time, like over that period of 7 to 8 years, the school had experienced a major change in demographics. He said industry became less prominent in the Fox Valley, which is located in Appleton, Wisconsin. Home rental prices dropped to the lowest in the surrounding area, and government subsidies increased. He said that 68.6% of the student population were identified as economically disadvantaged. So he said that the staff came upon this challenge over that period of time, that now they needed to teach students with very diverse experiences and learning gaps. And he said when he entered the school, there was a culture of low expectations. Now, upon his arrival, he put together a leadership team with teacher representatives between kindergarten and grade 5. And he said that due to that downward shift in accountability, their efficacy beliefs were at an all-time low. He also talked about, and I loved this quote, that there was a need to change the narrative, that while making he wanted to make sure that teachers' voices helped to shape the new narrative that he desired to create. So making sure that he empowered teachers and included teachers in the plan. So in that first year, Garth described a 2-pronged approach: high expectations for students and relationship building. And the leadership team created and widely shared a set of high expectations for students, and they focused on building relationships to ensure that students, staff, and parents felt welcomed and respected. Now, the following year, just 1 year later of engaging in that work, the school realized a 10% increase in overall proficiency on the school report card. Now, Garth leveraged this as an efficacy enhancing opportunity. Once the faculty became aware of that 10% increase, they realized that what they were doing was making a difference, and that they did have the ability to impact positively on student outcomes. Garth continued to explain the significance of the results from the first year. He said we were amongst the lowest rated elementary schools in the state. That 10% was a significant improvement, and it took us from one of the lowest rated schools and placed us in the middle. And he said he wanted teachers to be very aware of that because it would help in building their efficacy. Now, in the second year, Garth encouraged teachers to examine evidence more regularly. And we're not talking external type evidence, but growth and progress, internal measures, and anecdotal evidence. And so through that, he knew that teams could continue to see the efforts in a short-term way. They could see those small wins. And finally, after 5 years, this is the state report card, and I'll just draw your attention. They're now at a score of 85.8 This is the 2016-17, so it's a few years ago. But they continue to meet standard, significantly exceeding expectations. But even I wanted to draw your attention to the significance of the gap closing, 95.3% in gap closing. And he said that was unheard of and very, very significant. They were able to make that much of a difference in closing the achievement gap. And you see the numbers there. So quick last case study. And then I'll ask you to think about what's resonating with you. What questions do you have? This is a Maine Township in Illinois. And we actually visited this school. And I've never done any work in any of these schools, so I'm not trying to take credit. I've just made it a mission to try and find examples that would resonate with people of where both collective efficacy and student achievement have coexisted. And we interviewed teachers. We sat with teachers in this high school in Illinois, and also some instructional coaches and their principals and a superintendent. And so the demographics at this high school in Maine Township, you see here on the screen. And what we heard from those that we interviewed was that they were experiencing a rapidly changing student population. And one real impediment to student success was that students were restricted to enriched programs. The most successful students had access, but it was often denied to others. And they said particularly minority students, that those upper, kind of enriched courses were kind of closed to those students. And I loved this quote. I'm going to just share a quote. This is what somebody said when we interviewed them. It was difficult to uncover what was happening, that we weren't meeting the needs of all of our students. Our most challenging courses too often weren't available to our traditionally underserved students, a population that's been our fastest growing. It would have been easier to maintain the status quo. However, identifying the inequity and bringing it out in the open was a necessity. Now, when the staff understood that, they said there was a need to do better. And creating access to enriched courses for underserved students became their primary area of focus. And over time, enrollment in accelerated, dual credit, or advanced placement courses almost doubled in the course of 5 years. And in addition, Maine Township students, I'm just going to advance to the next slide, outperformed the predicted ACT University entrance exam composite scores. Given that ACT composite scores are typically 23.6% higher for income and 19.5% lower for low income, this is a powerful closing of the income achievement gap. What did they do? They started to examine their practice and really reflect on collective impact or lack of it. And when they started to see improvements, it fueled their motivation to try harder and set higher goals. They engaged in collaboration focused on instructional improvement and started to raise their expectations of what their students were able to accomplish. So I'm just going to pause there. I'm going to try and catch up in the chat pod because I did a lot of talking, and I'm just pulling up the chat pod to see what people are saying, what specific strategies. And so those are some great questions. And I knew I had a limited amount of time. And I want to address that, I think, in the next piece. Sheila, thank you for asking that. And I think that'll come up in the next chunk that we have together, because I'm aware of the time as well. Yeah, and in this short amount of time, I don't think we can really do it justice. Part of my intention of sharing those case studies was to show that it is possible. It took time, and it didn't happen with one individual. It happened by the collective really coming together to examine what it was they were doing. Different strategies in different buildings, like in the Maine Township example, they really focused on cooperative learning in the classrooms. And they did a train the trainer model. And when they realized that it wasn't working, that very few were implementing, they monitored the implementation and continued to really take a deep dive at supporting teachers and using cooperative learning in their classes. The students' voices and teacher voices, I think, was really critical. And in the example in Wisconsin, that was a big theme. Same with in Maine, they had teachers leading the work and entrusting teachers to do that. And in the new London example, they were looking at common formative assessments. That was probably one of the major tipping points in that example. And so, why does collective efficacy result in such a high effect size? As I said earlier, efficacy beliefs impact how teams think, feel, motivate themselves, and behave. When efficacy is lacking, teams give up. But when efficacy is firmly established, it also results in some incredible things, like people figure out how to make evidence-based strategies work in their environment, given their unique students, their unique population, and their circumstances. Collective teacher efficacy results in greater effort and persistence, higher goals. And as teachers see the difference that they're making, it just fuels their motivation even more, and they set higher goals as a result. And it's that reciprocal relationship. They start to see that the results are happening, their efforts are making a difference, and it fuels them to continue to try even harder. One of the things that resonates with me, though, the relationship between collective teacher efficacy and teachers' expectations. We know that teacher expectations have an effect size of 0.43 above the hinge point. We also know that when expectations are low, it results in a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when expectations are high, it also results in a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you've been with me before, you've probably heard me talk about this experiment around expectations that started in a laboratory, a science lab, where the technicians in the lab were told that certain groups of rats were bred to be maize brilliant, and other groups of rats were bred to be maize dull, when in fact there was no genetic difference between those two groups of rats, and they were randomly selected to be placed with labels of high expectations versus low expectations. And after 6 weeks, when the experiment ended, what they found was the rats who were labeled maize brilliant actually outperformed the maize dull rats in a statistically significant way, even though they were randomly assigned to that group. What the researcher Rosenthal believed was that it was because the lab technicians handled the maize brilliant rats more frequently and with greater care. And so he took his experiment into schools and told teachers that certain students had passed the Harvard Test of Advanced Intelligence, when in fact the test did not exist and the students had been randomly selected. And at the end of the experiment, the students who had been labeled with high expectations outperformed their peers in a number of measures. This is called the Pygmalion effect, that our beliefs influence productive patterns of behavior that impact students' positive beliefs about their own ability, which cause students to act positively toward their teachers, which reinforces teachers' beliefs. This study has been carried out in a number of domains. Saw an article around a study of the Pygmalion in the military, and the trainers were told that certain cadets were command potential and others you can't expect much from this group. When again, random selection, and in the end of basic training, those who had been labeled with high expectations outperformed their peers. But to me, one of the major things that collective efficacy does is that if it's there, teachers tend to raise students' expectations of themselves by convincing kids that they can do well in school. And that is the second highest variable in the visible learning database, that students' expectations are second only to collective teacher efficacy with an effect size of 1.33. And by contrast, students who are taught by teachers with a low sense of efficacy have lower performance expectations. They struggle and continue to struggle academically, and they end up with a weakened sense of self-efficacy. So in our last few minutes, we have 15 minutes left before you are scheduled for a break. I want to talk about some actionable steps that you and your team might take to foster efficacy in schools. Now, I was fortunate enough last night to present a webinar with John Hattie. It was sponsored through Corewing Canada, and we had about 300 people on. It was during the same hour in the evening, my evening, your afternoon. And I took a couple slides from that presentation because John made a couple points that I thought really resonated with the audience and with myself. He put this slide up and he asked the audience to think about, if you look at these items, Do you think they're in the blue zone? Do you think they're above the hinge point? Where do you think they fall along that continuum? Do you think any of them, and a couple of them, are actually in the red zone? And he asked people to think about the narrative in schools. What are the things that we tend to talk a lot about? And his argument was, we talk a lot about these things that you see here on the screen. And then he shared the effect sizes of those things. And he said, you see here, they don't really tend to matter a whole lot. And he encouraged the audience, and I encourage you when you think about steps, actionable steps for building efficacy in your work, he encouraged them to compare those to these that you see here on the slide. These are what he calls his big 7. And he says it boils down to the teachers and the schools and the expertise that we have, the knowledge and the expertise that we have. And number 1 is teachers and students working together as evaluators of their impact, all having high expectations. He listed moving toward as one of his top 7 explicit success criteria. So we all know what impact looks like, so that the students are clear about what that measurable impact looks like, and the teachers are clear. He talks about the Goldilocks principles of challenge, meaning getting it right, the right balance of skill versus challenge, keeping students in that area of flow where it's not too difficult, but it's not too easy either, that they've got to put forth effort, that we have challenging goals for them and for ourselves. And of course, where errors and trust are welcomed as opportunities to learn. And this one, number 6, maximizing feedback to teachers about their impact. I think in those stories, the case studies, and maybe I didn't make it explicit enough this time around, but that is definitely one thing that happened in those schools. The leaders, the formal leaders and the informal leaders, leveraged those opportunities where teachers were making measurable differences and continued to make them aware of that. So web-based learning is interesting. Do you need to read Hattie's book on professional learning before? I think that it depends on where you start. And I think the web-based learning, he made a point last night, and he says this in a blog, and I can send a link to this blog. When the pandemic hit and schools closed, he wrote a really, I thought it was one of the best blogs, and I've shared it with the Silicon Valley and the Eastside Alliance in a previous webinar. It was looking at the effect sizes when schools are closed, what matters and what doesn't. And he didn't use the term web-based learning, but he used distance learning. And he said it has an effect size of 0.17, low. But he said that's not to be interpreted as that distance learning doesn't matter. He interprets that as the medium doesn't matter, that it doesn't matter how we deliver, the medium in which we deliver, but it matters what we deliver and how we go about doing that. So I thought that was a really positive message. And I love the visible learning synthesis, but I use it more as kind of like a go-to on a shelf. It's pretty dense, and it is now 2009, but I think if you're looking to one of the books, I would go for the Assessment Capable Visible Learners. That other one, you can get some of the updates, and there's a website called MetaX where you can get the information that's more updated than the original synthesis. So I'm making a mental note, and I'll put a link to MetaX in the chat pod when I have an opportunity. Okay, so I just want to continue here. I think this is a really important notion. You know what I'm going to do, though? I'm going to stop my share for just a second, and I'm going to share it a different way, if you would give me just a chance here. I think I'm still sharing, but what I want to do is go to here so I can unpack this. Okay, so when I think of steps and knowing collective impact, when I work with teams, I think what we need to do is, as John said, be evaluators of our impact. Do the results from our joint work result in an improvement in student outcomes or no improvement? And I think that's one of the questions that our team has to consider. And then the next question becomes, if there was an improvement, does the team have no understanding of how or why those results were achieved? Or does our team have a clear understanding of how and why those results were achieved. And if it's no improvement, does our team have no understanding? And if it was no improvement, does our team have a clear understanding? And what I'll often do is ask teams, where are you? Oh, thank you for that link to the MetaX. I'll ask teams, where are you? What path are you on? And I don't expect you to answer that. It's kind of more of a hypothetical or a reflective question. And then I ask teams, where would you like to be? When I start this work with teams, sometimes I find that people haven't been able to identify a path because they haven't even answered this question. Is the work we're doing making an improvement or not? And this is the first layer. And so what path is ideal? And I will ask you to contribute that in the chat pod. What path is ideal? And I'll just take a moment to pause and ask you to identify which path or paths are ideal. Okay, I'll pause for another moment. Which paths are ideal? A lot of people like path 2, I notice. And I agree that I think that one's ideal, but I also believe, and there's somebody who's put that in from Ramblewood, and more people are seeing this now, path 4. I like path 4 as well. I think path 2 and path 4. And so if we're on path 1, the results from our joint work showed an improvement in student outcomes, but the team has no understanding of how or why. The question becomes, was it luck or did the change in practice make a difference, and how can we find out? And if it's path 2, which you guys just identified as ideal, we have an improvement in student outcomes with a clear understanding. What we find gets people and teams on path 2 is when they bring evidence and artifacts of student learning to their PLCs, to their impact teams, when they come together to collaboratively examine progress and talk about instructional improvement. That's what gets people on path 2. And they have those clear understandings. They come together to figure out that adaptive work of meeting the needs of all learners. And they start to drill down because in the conversations that occur, they realize that perhaps additional scaffolds need to be in place for certain groups. But it can be a really empowering place to be when you're on path 2. If it's path 3, no improvement with no understanding, sometimes our time and resources get diverted. We get stuck in those activity traps that divert our time and energy away from what matters most. And that's a focus on student learning. And so it's just a matter of refocusing our efforts and getting back into a cycle of professional development focused on student outcomes. And if it's path 4, what you guys identified as ideal as well, what Professor Hattie talks about, and he shared this last night with the audience, and I've heard him share it before, we might have learned that it's the right strategy, but at the wrong time. Maybe that's what we've discovered. He talks about inquiry-based learning having a fairly low effect size. And he says that it's because of, if you drill down to the story behind the numbers, just like homework, and if we look at those studies more carefully, we realize that the variability of problem-based or inquiry-based learning is very variable. And it varies depending on when it's introduced to students. If inquiry learning is introduced before students have enough background knowledge, it falls very flat and the effects are low. But if it's introduced at the right time, it can be incredibly powerful. And so that might be what we learned. Wrong strategy, wrong time, or right strategy, wrong time. Or maybe it's that the strategies we're using, and especially in our mathematics classes, we haven't yet implemented with enough fidelity yet to see a difference, like success criteria, learning intentions. We have to implement them over time with fidelity to see the difference. And so I want to just come back to impact teams. And I know some of you, I'm seeing some familiar faces. I haven't been able to scroll through. I only see a few people on my screen, but I know some of you were involved in impact teams. I think the majority on with me have not been. But that's that analysis piece where we're coming together as a group to identify the success criteria, one of John's big 7s, co-construct it with our students. Analysis is a big piece of the impact team model by examining student work and inquiring into students' thinking. and then coming up with an action plan for assessing the impact of our work. So in our last few minutes, I'd just like you to think about this question, keeping efficacy in mind. What's one thing you might do this fall with your team? How can you get on path 2? How can you change the narrative? That's what I love about John Hattie's message and when he shared with the audience, you know, that slide. These are the things we talked about, but these are the things that have greater impact, and especially our beliefs when I think of the role of efficacy. Efficacy beliefs have a major impact, being at the top of the visible learning synthesis. I love quality questioning. Questioning and even self-questioning has a high effect size. I know they're both up there, and you can turn to that MetaX website to get the particulars on questioning and the higher expectations. And I meant to say at the beginning, the congratulations to the teachers who are leading the sessions after the break. It's wonderful that you've stepped up to share with your colleagues and to allow them to get a vicarious experience through you of some of the successes that you've had in your work. For quality questioning, one of my close friends and colleagues is named Jackie Walsh, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with her work, but she does a lot of work around quality questioning. She's got a couple of really good books. And I just want to be very aware of our time. I don't want to go over. So I want to revisit the anticipation guide. And I don't expect you to answer this. This is just more of a self-assessment for yourself. Are there things that you agreed or disagreed with at the beginning that now, if we go to that far right column after this short presentation, have you changed your thinking at all? I'm just catching up with the chat pod, seeing some of the things that you're planning. Thank you for sharing. And a revisit of the success criteria as well. So as promised, I wanted to come back. Maybe these were things that you were able to do at the beginning of this session. I hope that by joining me, you were able to get some information, raise some questions perhaps for future learning. But I'm going to ask you just to take a moment and do a self-assessment. Where are you in relation, if you had to describe this? How would you go about explaining these things? And there's my little Lucy. My dog just joined me in the room. My husband's supposed to be on doggy duty. And so I just want to end with this quote and have you reflect on this, because to me, this quote really speaks to the notion of collective efficacy, where our beliefs become our thoughts become our words become our actions become our habits become our values, and our values become our destiny. And I want to thank the Silicon Valley group and the Eastside Alliance for the partnership this year, and I look forward to your future endeavors. And we're right on time. That worked out really well.
Thank you so much, Jenni.
Thank you. I know it's break time, and I know at the beginning, Denise asked me if I was going to stay and join. What I'm going to try and do is pop in again. So V, if you'd watch for me, I don't want to miss some of those teachers' presentations. They look amazing. And if it's okay, after I grab a quick bite, I might try and pop into a couple of those. And thanks again for having me as your keynote in your first virtual conference.
Thank you, Jenni. That's great. Yeah.
All right, so at this point, dear friends, we are about to go to our breakout rooms, but before that, please make sure that you have indicated the room that you would like to be joining in after our 10-minute break. So any other announcement, Denise?
No, that was it. Breakout, and just another thank you to Jenni. I don't know if she can hear us, but that was great. Really appreciated that.
All right, so we'll be back at 3:40.
Okay.
For Those of you who have not, if you notice under the participants list, I changed all your name. And for those who have no number on your name, please let me know in the chat which room you're interested in to be a part of so that I can help set up the breakout room during your break time. Thank you.
V. Hi, V.
Yes, hi.
Would you help me find out what is that number in front of me then? So in front of my name.
You're right now, you're
For the next 40 minutes or so, we will be into breakout rooms, and these are the following rooms in which you pre-selected before Jenny's portion a while ago. We have room number 1 with Miss Kelly Maida, Understanding Polygons. Room 2 with Miss Danielle Let's Talk Mathematics. Room 3 with Sandhya Raman, Quality Questioning. Room 4 with Miss Wanderly Peralta, Building Academic Language. Room 5, Mr. Gila Goylo, Number Sense, and room number 6 with Miss Lorna Wilson, Quality Questioning. Next slide, please. So you will be in the breakout rooms for 25 minutes. And during that time, that is going to be a space for all of us to explore, understand, and respond to the call of time. So each teacher leader will lead a breakout room, as I've mentioned a while ago, and they are going to be sharing some strategies they've utilized to elevate voices and heighten the participation of students in the class. Some of those strategies are examples pre-COVID, some are during COVID. So while you're in the room, I would also like for you to access this particular link, tinyurl.com/ESA jamming. If you haven't used Jamboard before, this is actually a Jamboard with 7 kind of like whiteboards, and you will be utilizing some Post-it notes to take notes some of your takeaways while our presenters are doing their presentation during the breakout. Next slide, please. So these are the guiding questions while you will be in the breakout rooms. I would like for you, dear friends, to be thinking about the strategies that were shared by our teacher leader. That was based off of the Eastside Alliance Mathematics Toolkit. How were those strategies being used to engage our students? What did you learn from seeing some student sample work highlighted in the presentation by our teacher leader? And please share us some key takeaways. Welcome back. Next slide, please. So the Jamboard looks like this. There are, as you can see on top, there are 7 whiteboards from page 1 all the way to page 8. And each board actually is numbered. So if you will be in Miss Maida's room, please utilize whiteboard number 1. If you will be in Miss Let's room, please utilize whiteboard number 2, and so on and so forth. And at the far left corner, as you can see, there are kind of like tiny little bit of Post-it notes. Click on that and you can, type in your reflection or your takeaway or your feedback as to the presentation of our teacher leaders. And then we'll come back after the 25 minutes to do a 10-minute debrief. And I hope, dear friends, that when you get to your breakout rooms, to please assign someone else to report or share 1 or 2 takeaways. And you have a maximum of 2 minutes to share that in a little bit. Next slide, please. All right, so that will be our slide for our debrief. Go back to the previous one. Christina, please, thank you so much. Right now, may I ask you then to type in tinyurl.com/ESA jamming. Let me know if you're there.
the link is also in the chat box.
Okay, the link is
When I try to go to that link, it says there are currently too many people viewing this file. Please try again later.
It's too many participants. So in other words, it cannot. So I probably would at this point, now we know it couldn't accommodate as many as 50. Just keep that in mind. Some folks will probably be out of that link in a little bit. So just jot down your notes or your takeaways and please be back when you can. Will that work? Okay, so now we're ready for our breakout rooms. Make sure we have the rooms available. V.
It's ready.
It's ready, thank you.
Sending everybody to their breakout rooms.
Right, I know.
How is it? How is it already time? I still have 9 minutes left in my timer.
That was good.
Did you guys finish Wonderly?
You're not
No.
alone. We're in room 6 and we just barely finished with the presentation and just asking a couple of questions. We didn't get to reflect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
We ran out of time.
I
too,
think
so-
somebody is not looking at the watch. Sorry.
Under 25 minutes. Yeah.
I timed myself. I have 8 minutes left.
Yep.
I believe you, Gil.
I appreciated having the quick reminders at the top of my page pop up.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
I will
yeah,
take
I
the
know.
full blame that I'm not good with numbers.
But you know what? 25 minutes is really is quick, right? I mean, that's why it's just like boom, intro and so on and so forth. But we were in room 4 with Wonderly, and we were able to get to just 1 or 2 samples of student work, right, Wonderly?
Yes, yes.
And that was it, yeah.
We were able to talk about the first one, but we haven't really looked at. There were 4 activities that I have. We were only able to start with the first one. We did not get to have the last person speak about it.
Yeah, it wasn't 25 minutes.
We were supposed to do Goldilocks, follow the Goldilocks. Neither too much, not too little, just right.
Just right.
I'm going to
Thank you.
piggyback on all the complaints here. Just to annoy you, I'm going to piggyback on all the complaints.
Please do.
But it was amazing though, with the short given time that we had. We were so happy that you, especially our teacher leaders, led those breakout sessions and shared a little bit. I know we didn't have a lot of time. Some examples. What's interesting and what's really is amazing is that we will be sharing all the slides of all 6 breakout sessions to everyone. And so as soon as we have the final slides from our presenters, we are going to be emailing them to all of you to see more about the sessions that you missed, because we only get to attend 1 of the 6. And so right now, as I was looking at the Jamboard, we had several notes, post-it notes there that has been added, which is really cool. If you will have some time, you can add some notes, some takeaways that you were able to learn from the presentations that you heard. But right now, we are going to have a short debrief of what you were able to witness from the breakout sessions that you had attended. And so V is also really good at these numbers. I tell you, if you were able to assign someone else to say something about what they learned about that short session that you had, please do so. And we are going to start with breakout room number 1.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can Gil's group go back to meeting instead of doing a debrief, because we didn't get the full slice.
Oh.
Instead of debriefing, I'd like to go back and at least do another activity, because we don't have nothing to debrief about.
Oh no.
Yeah, ask Gil.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I said, Mark, we still have 9 minutes left in the timer, but
Oh no.
It's up to you, Bernadette. Pull the trigger.
I know we have to pull the trigger. Okay, so the thing is, do we have? We probably could go back and do some 5 minutes here, 5 to probably even max of 7. V.
Give us 6.
Yeah, we can give them 5. Thank you so much for your flexibility as well as your feedback as well to give us the opportunity to send you back to the breakout rooms and had a deeper, conversation discussion with our teacher leaders. And so we're just gonna, we probably will not take the whole group to share everything else, but if there's any group who would like to share their takeaway, here's the opportunity. Anyone from group 1 or group 2 or group 3?
I was in group 1. I think we saw a great lesson on polygons for little guys, and it was, it was really great to see the different activities the teacher designed for kids and how she used their artifacts for assessment. And then in our extra few minutes we just had, we started talking about technology that people worked with and what they liked.
Thank you so much, Mary. Group 2 or group 3?
I can share something. So when I was in room 3, I was about questioning, and we each contributed something different to questioning. And one, I think, was contributed like to have the students become interested in the topic, and others is like how to deliver the lesson itself and so on. So that bring me to the point how the presentation started, the efficacy, collaborative efficacy, or the socioeconomic group, or, because sometimes students, they don't feel the confidence to ask questions, or sometimes they just not interested or they could not relate to it. So everything was discussed. I felt together it was important, not one above the other, but it brought me back to the beginning of the presentation, which is just wonderful. So that's all. That's my takeaway. Yeah. So
thank you, Mariam.
You're welcome.
Someone from the high school group?
The presentation of Gil is somehow things that might probably be consumed and be used by other high school teachers. And this talks about the math talk. And this is kind of like a method where, in fact, the kids can share their thoughts about how to solve the problem and be able to come up with a conclusion that they can make at the end of the whole thing, while hearing some other thoughts from other members of the group. So I find this method that is kind of like, this is really something that needs to be done in the classroom, because this one is collaboratively done, though the thoughts are actually being shared from one person to another person.
Thank you so much, Odie.
Also in group 6, the high school team about the quality questioning, the takeaway is about addressing the strategies, or I mean the effective strategies in questioning. So we have to question so that the kids will be engaged and also at the same time learning. We have different framework of quality questioning, starting with getting started, how do you know about it? And then we come up with, while we're doing, we are comparing one, like for example, in a graph, you don't just necessarily show the graph, but you have to ask while doing it by comparing the graph from one to another, or probably what will happen when the slope is a negative, something like that. and there's also a reflection and clarification at the end. So there are like frameworks of quality questioning that we can address in addressing this.
Thank you so much, Milagros. And I know I put it in the chat, dear friends, a link to the Jamboard. And if you have any other takeaways that you could add on to the breakout rooms that you went to, that would be so helpful for all of us to, again, improve the way we provide support for everyone else. And so at this point, next slide, please. So I am going to give you a little bit of background about the video that you're about to see here. Jo Boaler, she has been crucial in the development of the mathematics toolkit. And if Manny is still here with us, actually, I have the exact date, Manny, on August 23 of 2016. Manny, Barbara Shala, and myself attended a 3-day professional development at Stanford University on mathematical mindset, way back. And the creation of the mathematics toolkit was anchored strongly on Boaler's work, mathematical mindset, and also John Hattie's The Politics of Collaborative Expertise and the Politics of Distraction. And today's Boaler's work on growth mindset through the U-Cubed link or website and a number of books she published has been transformative in truly unleashing students' potential through creative mathematics. What you're about to see is one of Jo's compelling videos, the message to all learners that includes us, teachers, our students, and parents as well, to believe in our mathematics potential. And as you are watching this tiny little clip here, I encourage you to take notes of some inspiring messages that cultivate meaningful steps towards contextualizing mathematics instruction in students' experiences. The video is about 12 minutes, and we'll be asking you to come back after seeing the video for our debrief. So any questions before we see the video? All right, so Christina, kindly open the video for all of us. Thank you. Oops. Christina. Christina. V.
Yep.
I think Christina is.
I will share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello. I want to tell you about a really amazing experience that keeps happening to me. I give people maths problems and they cry. So you're probably thinking I give them a time test of multiplication facts and tell them it's a measure of their intelligence, which is one of the terrible things that go on in schools all the time, imposed by governments. But actually, it's the opposite of that. And I have given them an open visual creative question, and combined that with really important brain science on what we know about the brain and how it processes mathematics, which I'd like to share with you today. So let me tell you about one of the experiences. It happened in California near Stanford, where I teach. And I'd been working with a whole room of elementary teachers, many of whom had sat through hundreds of hours of algebra classes, pushing symbols around a page and getting the idea that they really couldn't learn higher level mathematics. So I wanted to give them a different experience of algebra. And I didn't give them tables of numbers and symbols. Instead, I gave them this visual pattern. And I asked the room of teachers, can you color the different ways you see this shape growing to show the growth? So quickly, the room became abuzz with different people seeing the shape grow in different ways. Some people saw the growth as a vertical growth. Some people saw it horizontally. Some people saw a diagonal growth. And some people made the pattern into a square to see the growth. Some people made it into a rectangle to see the growth. And there were many different ways people saw the pattern, these and many more. And so 2 people actually cried on this day. And what happened was, I know it sounds terrible, but what happened was we were working out how many squares would there be in any sized figure. And they were both women actually who cried, and one of the women realized that when she was looking at the 3rd case, the total number of squares would always be 3 multiplied by 4, and then divided by 2. She'd made it into a rectangle, so she had to take off those purple squares. And she realized that would be true of any case. So in algebra, because that's case 3, we can represent that in any case as n times n plus 1 divided by 2. And that actually gives us half n plus 1. So why was that moment so emotional for those 2 people? They'd come up with a quadratic expression. And part of the reason it was so emotional was because they'd sat through many hundreds of hours of maths classes, and they had got the idea that they could never do something as powerful as that. And when you have an experience that helps you realize that you can do something that you'd never thought you could do, that is a powerful emotion, particularly when it's something as important as mathematical thinking. So 2 things had brought that about. One of which was I'd shared some important brain science with the teachers, brain science that tells us that nobody is born with a maths brain and nobody's born without one. At least the good news. And everybody's brains can grow and change to learn any level of school mathematics. The myth of this math person is a very damaging myth that holds kids back on a daily basis. And the second piece of brain science I'd shared with them is the very best times for brain growth is when you're struggling and making mistakes. That's when your brain is on fire with brain growth. So when some of the people in the room were working on finding a quadratic expression, it was kind of challenging, but they knew that their struggle meant not that they weren't a maths person. Many kids in classrooms will struggle and think, I'm not a maths person, and give up. But instead, they knew that that struggle meant that their brains were growing, and that was really powerful for them. And so why doesn't that happen more often? And why had they not, in all of those algebra classes, been able to come up with quadratic expressions in these ways? And that's partly because maths classes often look like this. Individual learners sitting with lots and lots of numbers and symbols, which causes responses like this. And what we should have in maths classrooms is situations like this. Oh, this video is meant to play, no? So what we should have in maths classrooms is situations like this, students sitting, working together, sharing their ideas, working on visual, creative mathematics. And if we were watching this video, you would see that the students also in here were coming up with a quadratic expression that represents the number of colored squares on the cubes that they're looking at. And so when we combine important brain science with open visual mathematics, I call that mindset mathematics. And it combines the important work of Carol Dweck on mindset that tells us that when we change our mindset, when we change our beliefs about what we can do, it actually changes our learning with what we know about teaching maths as an open growth subject. So one of the studies that shows most powerfully what happens when we change our beliefs about what we can do, came from David Yeager and his colleagues, and they studied hundreds of high school English students. And all of these English students had written an essay, and all of them had received critical diagnostic feedback from their teacher. But half of the students in this study had received an extra sentence at the bottom of the feedback. And what was amazing was the students who received that extra sentence did significantly better a whole year later. So what was that extra sentence, you're probably wondering? At the end of the teacher's feedback for half of the students, the researchers had put this: I am giving you this feedback because I believe in you. And the kids who saw that at the end of their teacher feedback did significantly better a year later with no other change. It's pretty amazing. And when I share it with teachers, I say, I'm not suggesting you put on the end of every child's feedback, I'm giving you this feedback because I believe in you. One teacher in a workshop said, we don't put it on a stamp. I said, no. Teachers have a great sense of humor. I said, no, don't put it on a stamp. But we can be saying to our students and our children all the time, I know you can do this. I believe in you. You can learn anything. So the other important piece of brain science I wanted to share with you is this. When we work on a maths problem, even an abstract calculation, 5 different areas of the brain are involved, 5 different brain pathways. And 2 of the brain pathways are visual pathways. And in fact, the dorsal visual pathway is the main pathway for representing quantity. Our brains want to think visually about maths. And if you've been led to believe you're not a visual learner, you need visual maths more than anyone. The good news is we can make any maths problem a visual maths problem. And we can ask students, find the area of a 2 by 12 rectangle, or instead, we can ask students, can you find rectangles within an area of 24? This is a video that isn't playing. Any help? No. So, oh, I think we're going to see the video. So we can ask students, can you find an area of a rectangle, a 2 by 12 rectangle? Or instead, we can ask students, can you find any rectangles with an area of 24? That changes everything. Students' eyes light up. They're having to think about relationships between length and width. They're finding out things. And they can come up with many different solutions. So similarly, instead of asking, can you come up with a quadratic expression from this table of numbers and symbols, we can ask, how does this pattern grow? We can give many different patterns. People will see the growth in different ways, as we saw earlier, and each of those ways can be expressed algebraically. And it turns out we've come up with a whole range of algebraic expressions, all of them equivalent to half n times n plus 1. It's pretty amazing, really. And instead of asking students to multiply 18 times 5 and do it quickly in a timed test, which is damaging, we can ask them, what are the different ways you can see 18 times 5? And different students will come up with different ways of seeing it. We can look at different ways of seeing it together. And we're celebrating the multiple different ways people have ideas. It's really amazing. So I co-lead a center at Stanford. It's called UCubed. And we're dedicating to getting lots of free resources out to teachers, parents, students, to show them visual maths, to show them how our brain works when we learn mathematics. We were really excited. We started it 2 years ago, and we were really excited when we got about 5,000 teachers on the site. Now we get 3 million visits a month to the site. And that's because teachers are really excited. They're excited to change from meaningless, boring questions, 2 trains traveling towards each other on the same track, to visual, creative maths questions. They're also excited to change from students memorizing procedures all the time and instead to have students see and use powerful connections. They're also excited to take away the emphasis on speed and timing in maths and replace it with an emphasis on depth and creativity. And of course, to stop giving the idea that only some students can learn maths and some students can't, and replace that with the idea that the knowledge that we have that everybody's brains can grow and change, and mistakes and challenge are the best way to do that. My message for teachers of any content is open up that content and celebrate the many different ways people see and understand ideas. It turns out it's really important to do that, and that's because learning is actually a process of identity. When we learn new things, as Etienne Wenger has said, we don't just learn facts and information, we change who we are as a person. And as we learn new knowledge, new ideas, we change what we believe, we change who we are. And unfortunately, most students are sitting in maths classrooms now thinking, I'm not a maths person and I can't learn this. And until we change that belief, we will always have widespread underachievement. It is really important to believe in your own potential. We even know that if you go into a learning hard content, a challenging situation, and you think to yourself, I know I can learn this, but then you mess up or you make a mistake, your brain will react more positively than if you go into that situation thinking, I don't think I can do this. It is really important that we have self-belief. Our future selves are within all of us to create. It's really the world that tries to convince us we're not good enough. And the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu said something really important, I think. He said this. He said, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. So my last message for you is become who you might be. Help others to become who they might be. But remember to always believe in your own unlimited potential, because it's only then that you truly set yourself free. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so if you could help us with the next slide, V.
Just give me 1 second. I'm glad to see that Joe Bowler also have a technical glitch during her presentation as well.
I'm sorry, everyone. It froze on me as soon as I started trying to play it.
True. I mean, our technology, especially accessibility to Wi-Fi, is really is unstable as much as you see. And so thank you so much for being so flexible. And so at this point, and again, if you have some time, I am going to put on the chat again a link to any of the gems that you were able to get from Joe Bowler's short TED Talk. That would be awesome to have it there. And at the same time, you can always see what others are actually putting as a reflection based off of the breakout sessions that you attended, and also Joe's short TED Talk.
Bernadette, can you put the link for attendees in the chat, please?
The gem board?
No, the attendees, like for attendance. I don't know which link.
Ah, okay.
I could not copy it fast enough. So can you put it in that room? I can just do that. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, we will include that in the chat room, Mariam. Thank you. Okay, so I would just like for anyone to just share with us. And again, we have this floor to share what your big takeaways from Joe Bowler's TED Talk. And at the same time, if you have any notes as well, or if you have any quote that you like, the gem board is still open for.
I'll go first.
Go.
One of the things I learned during shelter in place is, number one, I did not like distance learning, but I made lemonade out of my situation. And I realized that when I went into my Google Classroom and I gave the kids feedback on their assignments, I noticed the quality of the work get better week by week. And so I actually had higher attendance towards the end of the distance learning than I did in the beginning. And I know it was because of me responding to their assignments on every single assignment that they did. I was giving them feedback, and it paid really good dividends. So to hear somebody else say it, it just like confirmed what I knew was the right thing to do. And I know I had not responded as much in the past when we were like in regular normal classroom. So this gave me the opportunity to actually respond more to their work.
Thank you so much, Mark.
I just want to contribute. Today's presentation from the beginning, it was just really wonderful. And I was going back to because I am retiring, as like some of you know, but some of the years where some of the years were successful and some of the years were not. So it brought me back, and I'm just reconnecting why it was successful. And it was that teachers who worked together, and I didn't know that was the reason. And now I see the importance of it. And Jo Boland, I attended one of her presentation in person, and I'm glad she always takes me back because I forget. And I become that a machine of a teacher where I have to cover curriculum and I have to get it's true. I have to have the objective, and we have to cover this and we didn't cover that. So it took me back that that things could be presented a little different, and covering everything is not the most important. And have students taking interest, they will do more in the future. And I love her last sentence, I think, about not to focus on what you become or say, maybe you can be or something. This, I don't remember, but I love it. So it was just, I think the whole thing, if you don't mind me talking like another few words, the whole thing, it was inspiring Bernadette from the beginning to even going to the breakout room. It's just the general atmosphere of like welcoming, and it's just wonderful to the end. That's my 2 cents in it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariam. And you also have the chat box if you have any quotes, or if you have any reflection, or if you have any key takeaways. It's also open for us to just jot down the things that we've learned so far.
So one more question, like about the attendance, because I still don't have the link in the chat. Would we get it in the email, or we have to do it now? Because I struggled with that last time.
Okay.
It'll be at the end.
At the end, thank you. Got it.
Okay, so with that, next slide, please. And this is going to be Denise. Are you ready for AFL 2020-2021?
Oh, okay. Are you ready is the question. Before I start, I just wanted to dovetail on something that Mark had just said about the importance of feedback for students in responding to work. And that resonated with me because I don't know if Mark remembers, but I had Ron Berger at one of my summer institutes in Evergreen. And his research is around the students working on that butterfly and revisiting it, how it looks until it gets to its most perfect resemblance of what they have in their mind, and the importance of giving feedback to students so that they can always give their best and be their best self. And when he talked about that, that made me think of Ron Berger and all the work that we did in our district around that. So kudos to you, Mark. And
I learned a lot.
Awesome. So thank you for those kind words, Ms. Mooney, about the work we've done today. And I hope that this year has been really exciting and added value added to what you do for students in your classrooms. And we can go to the next slide. So right now you're looking at a little peek of what we're planning for 2021. And the theme for next year, Assessment for Learning, is bridging teaching and learning in mathematics as we build capable learners. And we want you to know that we listen to what you say in the surveys and in the feedback, and you know, whatever you guys suggest, we try to make it happen. Just like today, V took us back into the breakout groups because someone mentioned that. So we're kind of, we don't panic, we pivot. So that was really cool that we could go back at least for a few more minutes so folks could finish out their learning. But this year coming up is truly going to be another exciting year. And with me and the teams that I work with, it just gets better. So you thought 2020 was amazing. We're just ready to really send you off the deep end for this year coming up. So all of these events and opportunities that we're planning, not only is a part of our vision, but it's a part of what we have heard you guys speak to us about. So we're going to definitely be diving deeper into the math toolkit because we feel that's a very valuable resource. And back in 2017, and you heard just from Jo Bowler, we really respect her work and the importance of it. And she's one of the pillars in that work, is that we continue to do that. And your superintendents and assistant superintendents are right on board with us in terms of moving that out there, getting it to folks that don't even know that it's available yet. So we're going to go deeper. We're going to be looking at making revisions because we know things have changed. So we're really excited about that. We're going to hear some math experts. We do hear them on videos, but we're going to have well, maybe they'll still be virtual, but we'll still have some other math experts come in and share some of the new research and great new strategies. So to keep you all on the cutting edge about what's out there in mathematics. And we're going to continue the dialogue around teacher and collective efficacy because we have to. As you saw, it's #1 on student achievement. We have to keep that in mind. We have to have those conversations because there's a lot of us still not aware of that concept, and we want to be the leaders in this work. That's why we have our teacher leaders coming up there. And thank you to all of those that participated today and throughout the year doing this great work. But we want to keep that alive and know that we have to still build out that concept. We're going to go deeper into culturally responsive teaching pedagogy. Another have to, because it's important. Even in the times right now where we're thinking about all the inequities, we have to be pushing the platform, as I say, and my boss says all the time, this is what we do, because if it's not intentional, it's not going to happen. So that's going to be another one of our conversations. Utilizing tech tools, that came up as one of the things that we really need to weave into this work. So however that's going to look, we'll be hearing some more feedback and we'll have a great platform for that. The UDL, I believe that's a universal design of learning. So how is that differentiated and how does that promote more student achievement? So just another great resource there. Of course, looking at formative assessments, because we have those amazing teachers that give that assessment every year and get that data that we need from the students. Hopefully we'll have more teachers joining on that, but we'll have to have that conversation again, because I know we're going to have new folks joining in AFL next year, because after this year and today, folks are going to say, I want to be a part of that professional learning community next year also. So we'll be reviewing some of the same things only because of our new folks. More engaging and informative symposiums. We are already planning for September an equity symposium during our awesome college week. That's in the the week of October 20th. We're going to have a math symposium built into that work. So that's 2 months right there. And then in November, we have our launching of the AFL sessions for the year. So we are ready. Are you ready? Is the question. It's going to blow your mind. Oh, go back, please. And then we have an opportunity for more guidance and strategies for distance learning. That's going to be critical. We don't know how long we're going to be doing virtual, but we still have to be prepared, being it's a hybrid or whatever, and we want to still keep bringing those great strategies out. There's some teachers that still need some more support in that area. We want to be there for them. We're going to hear from our teacher leaders more. So any of you that feel confident and have great strategies to share, when we need you, just step up and we'll support you as much as we can. And later on, we're going to talk about this great book study that one of your colleagues said, let's read Limitless Minds. And so we're going to start a book study on that particular book, and you'll hear more as how you can let us know if you want to be involved in that. So there's pretty much a peek at what we're going to do. So just keep your ears open and make sure you start registering as soon as you see all this exciting things start to pop up in your email. The next slide. Okay, and everybody's going to get these slides anyway, so you'll have this to mark your calendar for the dates when the AFL sessions actually begin. And as we get closer to these other symposiums and great opportunities that we're planning for you, we'll make sure that we have them out to you in plenty of time so you can get involved in that work also. But these dates, you can do a screenshot if you'd like, but you will have access to this anyway. And scoring sessions are on the bottom. All right. This is, I guess this is still for me. This is a shout out to the planning committee. And you guys that are on the planning committee, take your reaction little icon there and put it on your screen so we can see, because I don't have the list in front of me. And of course, I don't remember every name, and I don't want to say all the names and forget someone. So shout out to that amazing committee. This is your Eastside Alliance certificate signed by CEO of SBEF, my signature, and Bernadette's. And we just thank you doubly for all the work that you do. You step up. You always are there for us when we say we need you to do this, that, or the other. You don't say no. You just are right there to support us, and we appreciate that so much. So you will be getting a certificate, and I guess it's going to come to you virtually, but it'll be just as beautiful. But again, thank you, and thank you again.
And yeah, we just put the names on the chat, Denise. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna grab them. All right, I'm gonna say them anyway. You guys can read them, but I want to say them. Danielle, shout out. Sandia, Gail, Pam, Sukanya, Shannon, Catherine, and Flor. So thank you so much for your participation and your support. And some of you may be getting tired, I don't know, but there's going to be some conversation. We may have some folks that want to come in and try planning committee. Some of you might need a rest. I'm not telling you have to, but we're looking for more superstars. So that's what this screen is about. Okay, what else, Bernadette?
So the link, if you could just take a snapshot of that as well, dear friends, the bit.ly AFL-committee 2020, we're actually looking for a new planning committee for this coming school year. And so for those previous committee members, please do still apply. We invite you, and we also invite others to be part of this. And so please join us.
All of this will also be emailed, so no worries if you can't get the link right now.
All right, thank you, Christina. Next slide, please. All right, so Denise, would you like to start with this one?
Well, I would start by saying we appreciate your attendance, and we always like to have an opportunity for you to get a great resource or a little Starbucks card for you to have a little Starbucks whenever you like. So complete the registration form for attendance and complete the session survey. I think that enters you, and Christina, she's kind of the master of this, so she'll correct me. But there's an opportunity though that I can tell you about, and that's either to get our book that we're going to have for our book club, Limitless Mind. That's one of the prizes. And then Jenni Donohoo's book is also one, Collective Efficacy. Some of our impact team attendees and participants that have been going through that throughout the year had know Jenni, and they have her book. So they're both awesome books, but the Limitless Mind is going to be the ones that we're going to have an opportunity for the book study. But they are two of the resources that are for raffles, and then we're going to have a few Starbucks cards that will also be available. So you will, I'm not sure the order and how they're going to be distributed, but those are things that are possibilities for you for joining us today. And okay, go ahead.
So the books, either the Limitless Mind or Collective Efficacy, those two will be raffled based on the attendance of today's workshop. And there will be 3 gift card opportunities for the raffle for the survey that's coming up for this session.
Thank you, Christina. As you can see, there's also this third book, White Fragility. And so we were thinking just before we started this conference that if you're interested as well, we are going to be leading a summer book club starting sometime in July. And the book that we're going to be studying is White Fragility. And so we're also giving 1 or 2 books of that as well, if you will be completing the session survey. But for those who will be joining us for Summer Book Club, I hope you have the book, or just email me if you don't. I know we cannot provide all of the books, but it would be nice if we have some members who will be willing to join us, join our SBF team to read White Fragility. It's just so timely, dear friends, about what's happening around us right now, and to have the space for safe and courageous conversation about racism is something that we need to attend to right now. And so we will email you if you could just use the link bit.ly Math Book Club, and all the way towards the bottom is a question if you're willing to join our summer book club, and that will help us gain some traction in planning as to the sessions or to the time that we'll be creating for us to talk about racism.
And the other thing too, just to give you a time frame, so definitely White Fragility starts soon. That's like the beginning of July. The Limitless Mind is, we need to gather the names so that we can find out who wants to move forward with that one in the fall. And we want to have a virtual meeting so we can pick dates for that one. So that's very important around for the Joe Bowler book. So we just want to make sure that you get the distinction. One is starting soon. Limitless Minds is going to start, you know, later, closer to the fall. But Sandia, I think she was the one that brought this up. So here you go, girl. Get the folks together.
All right, is this you, Christina?
Yes, this is the link to the survey. So we'd really appreciate your feedback. Again, we do take your feedback seriously. We really do appreciate it. We would love to know what you think about these PDs. So please do copy that link, SurveyMonkey, and fill out the survey. It will also be emailed out. And again, there will be a raffle if you enter your information when you complete the survey. And I believe V has put in the registration as well in the chat box. So be sure to register. We do have a group fee coming up.
And so if you can unshare, then we will have the group fee.
You know, I don't know, maybe I'm doing something wrong because last time and this time I registered in advance. So we have to register again during this session?